Meanwhile, the Idaho legislature is constitutionally obligated to balance the budget. Yes, they pass laws, they oversee state agencies, but how many times do we hear during this legislative session, we only have one job every January, and that's to pass a balanced budget? Well, the state is about to violate its own rules and Constitution, thanks to decreasing revenue and increasing tax rebates. Idaho is expected to end the fiscal year of about $50 million in the hole. And cutting the fat, well, that won't even begin to cut it. It's a good thing Ozempic and Wegovy are now cheaper for those paying cash, because Idaho's budget is about to need those two drugs. Except, well, we're out of cash. This week, lawmakers in charge of such things, well, they learned it might be even worse than expected. Here's Joe Paris with an appetizer of what to expect for the 2026 session.
It's going to be an exciting year. Anytime revenues are tight, it gets very interesting.
Certainly a glass half full perspective from the co-chair of Idaho's budgeting committee, JFAC. A team of lawmakers are tasked with navigating a shifting financial reality for Idaho, from flush in cash a few years back to changes since earlier this year.
$375 million swing. And as a result, our projected budget deficit is slightly under what we set the appropriations at. Now, I want to remind the committee, I've been reading a little bit that our budget is unconstitutional, and that this is largely an academic exercise right now.
Keith Bybee is division manager of budget and policy analysis for LSO, and he's correct. The projections have Idaho at a budget deficit. New numbers just presented to lawmakers continue the projected deficit trend.
We have a projected deficit, but that's going to change by the time we finish our work in end of March, early April.
The current number is a deficit projection of about $50 million, and similar numbers in recent months pushed Governor Little to issue an executive order, a 3% budget holdback for most agencies. And projections go deeper, though, if you look into fiscal year 2027.
You would see that estimated ending balance at upside down by over $500 million. So we all know that this is just a point in time, right? It's just all academic and it's on paper right now. We have a lot of decisions to make.
Those decisions will define how the budgeting committee operates.
We have been in a very flush cash position since the pandemic, right? It was inflated money. It was one-time money in many cases. It was surplus. We are not in that position this time. Instead of deciding how much we're going to add to budgets, by and large, we will be deciding how much we will trim. So it will be a very different mindset that we will have.
Legislative leaders like JFAC co-chair Representative Wendy Horman are setting expectations for the budget process. She also made a point to push back on claims that the projected budget situation is a violation of Idaho's Constitution, requiring a balanced budget.
I want to point out that the question of constitutionality, this is not the first time this has ever happened in JFAC, in my experience. And at one point, we consulted with the Attorney General, who referenced a Supreme Court case that said our reserves count as revenue. So in terms of assessing revenue available to the state, reserves count per comments from the Attorney General and a Supreme Court case that I'm happy to share with anyone who's interested. Thank you.
That's our $1.8 billion.
That money, some commonly refer to it as rainy day funds, could be injected into gaps. Fundamentally, though, co-chair Senator Scott Grow outlined the process for budgeting for those agency asks.
Those are requests, and part of our responsibility in JFAC is to deal with requests. And whether or not each or all requests are granted is up to you. So, thank you.
From my perspective, now we're kind of like the good old days. This is where we operated from for many years, and we get to talk about wants versus needs, and we need to talk about efficiencies, and we need to talk about things that really need to get done as opposed to things that people would like to do.
With all that said, there is another factor looming, the one big beautiful bill. It included tax provisions which do translate to a lower revenue for states like Idaho.
If the tax foundation is right and it's a $284 million change, that's largely going to impact the current budget year that we're in.
Lawmakers have the option to not fully confirm with the cuts and provisions from the federal legislation.
We still have the ability to change. And so I expect that by the time we finish session in late March this year or early April, we'll leave town with a balanced budget and a projected budget surplus. And we'll leave the governor, the chief budget officer, the tools to make sure the budget stays balanced through the end of the year.
Time will tell if there is a surplus or not. At minimum, though, again, by state constitution, lawmakers need to set a balanced budget. Brian, I know there's a lot of questions at the State House and around Idaho. How did we get here? And a popular opinion, of course, is that there was $400 million in tax cuts, revenue to the state that has now been given back to the citizens. And it becomes a difference of opinion between people that believe that that money was better used in the pockets of citizens when they hear complaints about rising property taxes. Another factor in this, though, is different tax revenues, sales tax revenues, corporate tax revenues. They have been, in some metrics, lower than in years past. It was also pointed out that the sales tax revenue is handled differently over the last few years than it was historically, where there are, by code and by statute, I should say, specific areas that some sales tax revenue has to go to. It doesn't all just go into one big general fund pile.
Okay, we can explain that probably at a later date. But many people
later.
even texting in saying, what happened to this? We went from 2022 of a $2 billion surplus to a surplus of $99 million in 2023, and then 2024, $52.5 million. So you can see the trend was there.
Yeah.
It was going there. And it's interesting, as another person has pointed out during this show so far, you know how much the tax credit is for school choice?
$50
About
million?
$50 million.
That's true. That's
Got
true.
rid of that. They say they could solve that problem.
I don't want to go back to this because every time we report on this, we do. But the governor said, if I thought we could afford $400 million, I would have done it.
Yep, exactly.
So here we are.
Here we are. That's how we got here. Thanks, Joe.